My brother claimed the inheritance and left me penniless, as if my years of dedication and hard work meant nothing to him. But I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. While he thought he could erase my efforts and dismiss my contributions, I was quietly plotting my comeback, one that would make him regret underestimating me. This is how I turned the tables and reclaimed my rightful place in our family business. I poured my heart into every moment, sacrificing for the company we built together. I never imagined he would repay me with betrayal. When I learned of his deceitful actions, I felt the weight of his choices crush me. But instead of succumbing to despair, I chose to rise up. I was ready to fight for my dignity and protect my father's legacy. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now let's get into my story. The lawyer's office was quiet. The air felt heavy. I sat in a chair, my heart racing. My father had passed away a week ago. This was the day we would read his will. I thought about all the years I spent working with him, helping him build our family business. I believed I would inherit it. I felt ready. My brother, Derek, sat across from me. He had not been involved in the business. He spent most of his time traveling or working on his hobbies. I looked at him and felt a mix of hope and worry. Would he support me or would he fight me for the business? The lawyer entered the room. He looked serious as he opened the will. I held my breath. I wanted to hear my father's words. I wanted to know that all my hard work meant something. The lawyer began to read. I listened closely, my heart pounding. As the lawyer read, I felt joy. My father spoke about love and family. He praised me for my dedication. I felt proud. Then the lawyer read a line that changed everything. He said Derek would inherit the entire business. My heart sank. I could not believe what I just heard. Derek smiled smugly. He leaned back in his chair, looking pleased with himself. I stared at him, shocked and angry. How could this happen? I had sacrificed so much. I had spent countless hours working late, making sure the business thrived. And now it was all taken from me. Derek began to talk about his plans for the business. He said he would modernize it and take it to new heights. I wanted to scream. How could he think he was fit to lead? He had never shown any real interest before. I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. The lawyer continued reading. He explained that my father wanted Derek to run everything. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I looked to the lawyer, hoping for a way out. But there was none. This was my father's decision, and now I had no say. I felt tears welling in my eyes, but I fought them back. I would not show my weakness. In my family, showing pain was not allowed. I forced a smile, but it felt fake. I wanted to confront Derek to tell him how wrong this was. But I stayed silent, trapped in my anger. After the reading, I left the office. I walked to my car, feeling lost. The world outside felt different. I could not believe my brother had taken everything from me. I drove home, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. At home, everything felt empty. I looked around the house, remembering the times I had spent with my father. I remembered his laughter and his advice. Now all I felt was anger. I wanted to fight back, but I did not know how. I picked up my phone and called a friend. I needed someone to talk to. When she answered, I explained what happened. She listened and offered support, but it did little to ease my pain. I hung up and sat in silence. Days passed and I found it hard to focus. Derek was already making changes to the business. I heard whispers from former employees. They were worried about the future. I felt a spark of determination. I could not let Derek destroy what my father built. One night, I sat in my living room, going over everything. I thought about my father's will. I remembered how he often spoke about family loyalty. Derek's actions felt like a betrayal of those values. I decided I would not let him win without a fight. I began to gather my thoughts. I would need a plan. I thought about the business and my role in it. I had worked hard. I had ideas. Maybe there was a way to prove my worth. I started looking through old files and documents. I had saved many records of my contributions to the company. I found emails and reports that showed my efforts. I felt a spark of hope. If I could show my father's true intentions, maybe I could change things. The next day, I visited the company. It felt strange to walk in without my father. I met with some former colleagues. I told them my story and asked for their support. They listened and I could see they believed in me. Their faith lifted my spirits. One of them mentioned that Derek was struggling to manage the business. I listened carefully. This news gave me strength. If Derek was not capable, the employees might support me. I felt a plan forming. I decided to contact more former employees. I wanted to gather evidence of my contributions and Derek's shortcomings. I would show everyone that I was not just my father's daughter. I was a capable leader. I felt ready to fight for what was right. As I left the company, I felt a mix of emotions. I was still angry at Derek, but I also felt empowered. I knew I had a battle ahead, but I was determined. I would not let Derek take everything from me. I would reclaim my place. The fight was just beginning. I spent the next few days in a fog of anger and sadness. My home felt different. It was no longer a place of comfort. Instead, it was a reminder of what I had lost. I looked around my empty living room, feeling a sense of hopelessness wash over me. I had to adapt to this new reality, but I did not want to accept it. Derek wasted no time. He began dismantling parts of the family business I had helped build. I heard reports from former employees about asset sales and new hires that made no sense. Each piece of news filled me with rage. How could he do this? It was as if he was erasing my father's legacy. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wall. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I wanted to scream to confront Derek, but I held back. I knew I needed to gather my strength first. I had to find a way to fight back. As I sat there, something shifted inside me. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for the company. I had put in long hours. I had worked late nights and weekends. I had been there when the business struggled. I realized I could not just sit back and let Derek take everything. I had to reclaim my place. I picked up my phone and began to call former colleagues. I needed their support. I told them about Derek's actions and how I felt. They listened and some offered to meet. I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I was not alone in this fight. At our first meeting, I laid out my concerns. I explained how Derek was selling off parts of the business without any real plan. The atmosphere was tense, but I felt the energy shift. My former colleagues began to share their own worries about the company's future. They had seen the changes Derek was making and they were not happy. One of them, Sarah, spoke up. She had worked in finance for years. She said she was worried about the financial health of the company under Derek's leadership. Hearing this made me realize I was not just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who believed in the company and its values. We agreed to meet regularly. We would gather information and support each other. I felt a sense of purpose. This was the first step in my plan to regain control. I began to see a way forward. As days turned into weeks, I focused on digging deeper. I spent hours reviewing documents and reports. I wanted to understand the state of the business fully. I also contacted former employees who had left the company. They could offer valuable insights. Each call brought me closer to the truth. One evening, I found myself in my home office surrounded by papers and notes. I felt like a detective on a mission. I started to piece together a timeline of events. I noted the changes Derek was making and how they affected the company's performance. It was a lot of work, but I felt driven. Then one afternoon, something caught my eye. I found an old clause in my father's will. It stated that I had a legal claim to a portion of the business, but it required proof of my involvement. My heart raced. This was my chance. I had worked hard and I had the records to show it. I felt a wave of determination. I reached out to former employees and asked for their help. I needed to gather evidence of my contributions. I wanted to prove that my father believed in me. I wanted to show that I was not just his daughter, but a capable leader. As I collected more information, I felt stronger. I contacted people who had worked with me on various projects. They remembered my contributions and were willing to help. I felt grateful for their support. I was no longer alone in this fight. One evening, I sat with my former colleagues at a cafe. We shared ideas and strategies. Sarah suggested we create a presentation to highlight my contributions to the company. I loved the idea. We could show Derek that I was not just an outsider. I was a part of the company's success. We spent hours working on the presentation. I felt a sense of camaraderie with my former colleagues. We laughed and shared stories. I realized I had a team behind me. Together, we were strong. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the days passed, I prepared for what was coming. I was ready to confront Derek. I would not let him continue to dismantle our family business. I would show him that I was a force to be reckoned with. I also knew I had to be smart. I needed to gather evidence and present it at the right time. I had learned to be strategic. I would not act out of anger. I would plan my moves carefully. In those moments of preparation, I felt a shift. I was no longer the victim. I was a fighter. I was ready to reclaim my place in the family business. Derek would soon learn that I was not someone to be underestimated. The battle was just beginning and I would not back down. The days turned into a blur of meetings and preparations. I felt a growing sense of purpose as I gathered more information about the business and my father's will. My former colleagues had become my allies, and together we were working toward a common goal. One afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of documents and files. I felt determined. I carefully examined each paper, looking for anything that could help my case. I wanted to prove that I had been a vital part of the family business. It was then that I came across a folder labeled Family Business History. I opened it slowly, my heart racing. Inside were old contracts, financial statements, and meeting notes. I flipped through the pages, looking for something I could use. Suddenly, one document caught my eye. It was a letter from my father to the board of directors. In it, he spoke highly of my contributions and expressed his desire for me to have a stake in the business. I felt a rush of emotion. My father had believed in me. I quickly scanned the letter for dates and details. I could use this to show my involvement. This letter could be the key to proving my claim. I made copies and tucked them safely away. The next step was to gather more evidence. I reached out to former employees who had worked closely with me. I needed their testimonials. I wanted them to share their experiences about my work and dedication. One by one, they agreed to support me. They were eager to help. As I collected their statements, I felt a sense of community forming. I was not just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who believed in the company. Each positive comment fueled my resolve. With every piece of evidence, I felt more confident. One evening, I met Sarah at a cafe. We discussed the progress we were making. She suggested we compile everything into a comprehensive report. This report would outline my contributions, the financial health of the business, and Derek's questionable decisions. I loved the idea. It would give us a clear picture of what was happening. We spent hours working on the report. I felt energized as I typed up my findings. We included graphs, charts, and testimonials. I wanted to make it impossible for anyone to doubt my involvement or the damage Derek was causing. As we worked late into the night, I could feel the momentum building. When the report was finally complete, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I would present it to my former colleagues first. We needed to be ready for our next move against Derek. At our next meeting, I laid out the report. My colleagues listened intently as I explained each section. I could see their faces light up with recognition as I highlighted my contributions. They nodded in agreement when I pointed out the negative changes Derek had implemented. We had a solid case and it felt good to have their support. After our meeting, we agreed to take action. We would confront Derek together. I knew this would be a risky move, but I felt ready. I had spent too long feeling powerless. It was time to take control. The following week, I arranged a meeting with Derek at the family business headquarters. I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew he would not take this well. I prepared myself for the confrontation. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early. I wanted to be calm and collected. I took a deep breath as I walked into the conference room. The room felt cold and sterile. Derek entered shortly after, his expression smug. He sat down looking confident. I opened the meeting by addressing his recent decisions. I pointed out the changes he had made and how they were affecting the employees and the business. Derek rolled his eyes and dismissed my concerns. He believed he was in control, but I could see the cracks in his confidence. I then presented the report we had created. I laid it on the table in front of him. I watched as his expression shifted from indifference to surprise. I explained each point, highlighting my contributions and the testimonials from former employees. As I spoke, I could see him growing uncomfortable. He began to interrupt me, trying to undermine my claims. But I pressed on, refusing to let him derail me. I was determined to make my case. When I finished, there was a tense silence. I could feel the weight of the moment. I had laid everything out for him to see. I had fought back against his betrayal. Derek finally spoke, but his tone was different. He was no longer dismissive. He sounded defensive. He attempted to downplay my contributions, but I knew I had him on the ropes. I could sense that he was starting to realize he had underestimated me. As the meeting concluded, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had taken a stand. I had shown Derek that I was not just going to sit back and let him destroy our family business. I was ready to fight for my place and my father's legacy. As I left the conference room, I felt a sense of pride. I had taken the first steps to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew the battle was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. With each passing day, I was becoming stronger, and I would not back down. After the meeting with Derek, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I had confronted him, but I knew this was just the beginning. I needed to gather more support and allies if I wanted to reclaim my place in the family business. The next day, I called a few former colleagues to see if they could meet. I wanted to discuss our next steps. I arranged to meet them at a cafe I used to visit with my father. It felt nostalgic, but I knew I had to focus on the task at hand. When I arrived at the cafe, I saw Sarah and Tom waiting for me. They greeted me with smiles, but I could see the worry in their eyes. We quickly settled into a corner table. I laid out my plan for the meeting. I wanted to create a coalition of former employees who could stand with me against Derek. I think we need to show Derek that he is not alone in this, I said. If we can unite everyone who believes in the company, we can make a real difference. Tom nodded. I agree. Many people are unhappy with the changes he's making. They miss the way things used to be. Sarah added, we need to gather those voices. If we can show Derek that there is a strong community behind you, he will have to listen. With their support, we brainstormed ideas on how to reach out to former employees. We decided to create a simple message explaining my situation and inviting them to a meeting. I felt energized by the idea of bringing everyone together. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly. I reached out to former colleagues via email and social media. I explained my case and invited them to join us. Many responded positively, eager to support me. As the responses rolled in, I felt a sense of hope. We scheduled a meeting for the following week at the same cafe. I wanted it to feel like a reunion, a gathering of people who believed in our family business. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt nervous yet excited. I arrived early to set up the room. I wanted to create a welcoming atmosphere. When the first few employees arrived, I greeted them with enthusiasm. They were smiling and chatting, and it felt good to see familiar faces. As more people entered, the cafe filled with energy. I felt a sense of camaraderie. Everyone was there for a common purpose. I took a deep breath and stood up to address the group. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know many of you have concerns about the direction Derek is taking the business. I want to assure you that I am here to fight for what is right. This company is not just about one person, it is about all of us. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. I could see that many shared my feelings. I continued, I have been gathering evidence about my contributions and the issues that have arisen under Derek's leadership. We need to come together and support each other. After my speech, I opened the floor for anyone who wanted to share their thoughts. One former employee, Lisa, stood up. I worked closely with you and I know how much you put into this company. It's time we take a stand. Others chimed in, sharing their own experiences and frustrations. The atmosphere grew charged with determination. I could feel the momentum building and it fueled my resolve. As the meeting went on, we discussed strategies for how we could approach Derek again. We agreed that it was important to present a united front. I suggested that we gather testimonials from employees who were willing to speak out against the changes Derek had made. Let's document everything, I said. We can create a formal letter signed by everyone who supports this movement. It will show Derek that he cannot ignore us. The group agreed, and we began to draft the letter together. It felt empowering to collaborate with others who believed in the same cause. We worked late into the evening, fueled by coffee and determination. By the end of the night, we had a solid plan. We would gather testimonials, draft the letter, and schedule another meeting with Derek. I felt hopeful. I could see that my fight was becoming bigger than just my personal struggle. As we wrapped up the meeting, I looked around at the faces of my former colleagues. They were ready to fight alongside me. I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. Together, we were stronger. As I left the cafe, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer alone in this battle. I had a team behind me and we were united in our goal. Derek would soon realize that he could not push me aside. The next few days were filled with activity. I met with employees, gathered testimonials, and prepared for our next confrontation with Derek. I felt like I was finally taking control of my destiny. The fight was far from over, but I knew I was not backing down. This was my family business, and I would do everything I could to protect it. The day of the confrontation with Derek loomed closer. I felt both nervous and determined. My team of former colleagues had rallied around me and we were ready to present our case. We had gathered testimonies, documented changes, and drafted a strong letter. I was prepared to show Derek that he could not dismiss us. On the morning of the meeting, I arrived at the family business headquarters early. I wanted to gather my thoughts and center myself. I sat in the conference room, looking around at the familiar walls that once felt like home. Now they felt like a battleground. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting time, I felt my heart race. I reviewed our presentation one last time. I wanted to make sure I was clear and confident. This was my chance to stand up for myself and for everyone who believed in the company. Finally, the door opened and Derek walked in. He was dressed sharply, exuding confidence. But I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes when he saw the group of my allies waiting with me. He hesitated for a moment, then took his seat at the head of the table. "Let's get this over with," he said, his tone dismissive. I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for meeting with us, Derek. We are here to discuss the direction you are taking the company and the concerns we have." As I spoke, I could see Derek's expression change. He was not expecting a group. I continued, laying out our findings, highlighting the negative changes he had implemented, and showing the testimonials from former employees. I made sure to emphasize how his decisions were affecting morale and productivity. Derek interrupted me, trying to undermine my points. "You don't understand the business like I do. You are all just upset because I am making necessary changes." I stood firm. "We do understand the business, Derek. We have dedicated years to it. And these changes are not benefiting anyone but yourself. Employees are leaving and the company's reputation is suffering." He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. I pressed on, detailing the testimonials and the letter we had crafted. I could feel the energy in the room shift. My allies were nodding in agreement, and I felt their support propelling me forward. Derek's demeanor began to change. He was no longer dismissive, he was becoming defensive. "You think you can just come in here and take over? This is my business now." I felt a surge of determination. "It is not just your business. It belongs to all of us who have worked hard to build it. We all have a stake in this, and we deserve to be heard." As the meeting progressed, I could see Derek's confidence waver. I knew I had to keep pressing. I brought up the clause in my father's will that granted me a legal claim to a portion of the business. I wanted him to understand that I was not just making empty threats. I had the right to fight for my place. Derek's face turned pale. "You think you can just use that against me? I will not let you take control." I replied calmly, "I am not trying to take control. I want to work together, but that means you need to listen. Your decisions are harming the company, and we need to change course." The tension in the room was thick. I could feel the weight of the moment. I was standing up for what was right, and my allies were behind me. I was no longer the victim, I was a leader fighting for my family's legacy. Derek finally spoke, his voice strained. "What do you want from me?" I took a deep breath. "We want a chance to be part of the decision-making process. We want to work together to restore the company to its former glory. You cannot do this alone. You need us." He sat back, looking defeated. I could see that he was beginning to realize the depth of his mistakes. My allies chimed in, offering their support and ideas. They echoed my sentiments, reinforcing the need for collaboration. After what felt like an eternity, Derek finally relented. "Fine. I will consider your proposal, but I will not be pushed around. This is still my company." I felt a rush of relief. It was not a complete victory, but it was a step in the right direction. I knew we had made an impact. Change was coming, and I was ready to be part of it. As the meeting wrapped up, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had stood up to Derek and fought for my place. My allies and I had made our voices heard. We were no longer afraid. As I left the conference room, I felt lighter. The weight of uncertainty had lifted. I was ready to work with my team to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but now I had allies by my side. Together, we would fight for the future of the family business. Together, we would restore its legacy. After the meeting with Derek, I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. He had agreed to consider our proposal, but I knew that words alone would not change anything. I needed to be prepared for what came next. I was determined to keep pushing for the changes that would benefit the company and everyone involved. In the following days, I focused on gathering more evidence. I wanted to dig deeper into the company's financial records. I knew that if I could uncover any discrepancies or issues, it would strengthen our position. I spent hours in my home office reviewing documents and analyzing data. Late one night, I stumbled upon something troubling. I found inconsistencies in the company's financial statements. There were gaps in the records that raised questions. I felt my heart race as I connected the dots. If these discrepancies were true, it could point to potential fraud. This was serious. I knew I needed to be careful. I couldn't just confront Derek without solid proof. I decided to reach out to Sarah and Tom. They had been my strongest allies, and I trusted their judgment. We arranged to meet the next day at the cafe where we had gathered before. When I arrived, I wasted no time. I found something in the financial records, I said, my voice steady but urgent. There are discrepancies that could indicate fraud. Sarah and Tom leaned in closer, their expressions turning serious. What do you mean? Tom asked. I laid out the details I had uncovered. I explained the inconsistencies and how they could affect the company's bottom line. I could see the concern grow on their faces. If we can prove this, it could change everything, I said. We need to gather more evidence, Sarah suggested. We should talk to some of the employees who were involved in the financial processes. They might have insights. I agreed, feeling a surge of determination. We spent the next few days reaching out to former employees who had worked in finance. Many were willing to share their experiences. They revealed that Derek had made questionable decisions regarding spending and contracts. Some even mentioned feeling pressured to cover up issues. As we collected this information, I felt a sense of urgency. We needed to compile everything into a solid case. I began to put together a report, detailing the discrepancies and including testimonials from employees. I wanted to make sure we had every piece of evidence we could find. One evening, as I was working late, I received a call from Sarah. I think I found something, she said. I spoke to a former accountant who worked closely with Derek. He mentioned a contract that was signed without proper approval. I felt a rush of excitement. What kind of contract? It was a deal with a supplier that cost the company a lot of money. The accountant said it was not in the best interest of the business and he felt pressured to sign it. This was the breakthrough we needed. I asked Sarah to gather all the details she could. The more information we had, the stronger our case would be. I felt like we were finally closing in on something big. As we worked tirelessly over the next few days, the pieces began to fall into place. We compiled everything into a comprehensive report. I felt proud of what we had accomplished. This was no longer just about me, it was about protecting the company and everyone who believed in it. When the report was complete, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. We had gathered a solid case against Derek and it was time to confront him again. I knew this would not be easy, but I was ready. I scheduled another meeting with Derek. I wanted to present our findings and make it clear that we would not stand for any wrongdoing. The day of the meeting arrived and I felt the weight of the moment. I arrived early, gathered my thoughts, and prepared for what was to come. When Derek walked in, I could see that he was still confident. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes when he saw the report in my hands. I took a deep breath and began. Derek, we need to talk about the financial issues in the company, I said, my voice steady. I have gathered evidence that shows potential fraud and mismanagement. He scoffed, trying to dismiss me. You're just grasping at straws. You don't know what you're talking about. I pressed on, laying out the discrepancies and highlighting the testimonies from former employees. I could see his expression shift as I presented the evidence. I felt empowered, knowing that I was standing up for what was right. As I finished, I looked directly at him. We need to address these issues. If we don't, the company will suffer even more. Derek's face turned pale. He shifted in his seat, clearly rattled. I could see that he was beginning to realize the seriousness of the situation. He was cornered, and I wasn't backing down. You can't just walk in here and make accusations, he finally said, his voice shaky. You need proof. I smiled, knowing I had it. I have all the proof I need. We can take this to the board and the authorities if necessary. But I hope we can resolve this without going that far. The room fell silent. I could sense that Derek was reevaluating his position. I felt a surge of hope. This was my moment to reclaim what was rightfully mine and to protect the company my father had built. As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of triumph and relief. I had faced Derek and uncovered the truth. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing that I was not just fighting for myself but for everyone who believed in the family business. After the meeting with Derek, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I had laid out the evidence against him, but I knew this fight was far from over. He was not one to back down easily, and I was prepared for his response. In the days that followed, I focused on gathering support. I reached out to my former colleagues and shared what had happened in the meeting. I told them about the evidence we had collected and how we were prepared to take action. Their encouragement fueled my determination. I knew we needed to take the next step. I began to prepare for a legal battle. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in corporate disputes. I wanted to make sure we were ready if Derek decided to retaliate. When I met with the lawyer, I explained our situation. I laid out the evidence we had gathered and the potential fraud we had uncovered. My lawyer listened carefully, taking notes. "It sounds like you have a solid case," she said. "If Derek is mismanaging the company and harming its interests, we can take legal action." I felt a wave of relief. I had a plan. The lawyer suggested that we document everything and prepare to file a formal complaint if necessary. I knew this could turn into a lengthy process, but I was ready to fight. As we prepared for the next steps, I gathered my former colleagues for another meeting. I wanted to update them on what we were doing and how we could support each other. We met at the cafe again, and the atmosphere was charged with energy. Everyone was eager to stand up against Derek. At the meeting, I shared our plan. We need to be united. If we take legal action, we must present a strong front. We need to gather as much support as we can. Tom raised his hand. "What about the board of directors? Shouldn't we inform them about what's happening?" I nodded. "Yes, we should. They need to know the truth. We cannot let Derek continue to mismanage the company without accountability." We discussed how to approach the board. We agreed to draft a letter explaining our concerns, outlining the evidence we had gathered, and requesting a meeting. It felt empowering to have a clear plan. Over the next few days, we worked together to draft the letter. We made sure it was professional yet firm. We needed to present our case in a way that would grab their attention. I felt a sense of purpose as we crafted each sentence, knowing that we were fighting for the future of the business. Once the letter was complete, we sent it to the board members. I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. I knew that this could lead to a significant turning point. A few days later, I received a call from one of the board members, inviting us to a meeting. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was our chance to present our case to the people who could make a difference. I gathered my allies and we prepared for the meeting. On the day of the board meeting, I felt a sense of urgency. I arrived early to gather my thoughts. My colleagues joined me and we discussed our strategy one last time. I wanted everyone to feel confident and united. When the board members arrived, I felt the tension in the room. There were several familiar faces and I could see that they were curious about our concerns. I took a deep breath and began to speak. "Thank you for meeting with us today. We are here to discuss serious concerns regarding the management of the company," I said, my voice steady. "We have evidence of potential fraud and mismanagement by Derek." As I spoke, I noticed the board members exchanging glances. I laid out the evidence we had gathered, including the testimonials from former employees and the discrepancies in the financial records. I could see their expressions change as they absorbed the information. Derek sat at the end of the table looking tense. He tried to interrupt, but I continued to present our case. I felt empowered by the support of my colleagues. We were standing together and it felt right. When I finished, one of the board members spoke up. "This is serious. We need to investigate these claims thoroughly. We cannot allow any wrongdoing in our company." Derek's face turned red. "This is nonsense. You're trying to undermine my leadership." But the board members were not swayed by his outburst. They were focused on the evidence we presented. They agreed to launch an internal investigation into Derek's actions. As the meeting concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We had taken a significant step forward. The board had listened and they were committed to uncovering the truth. As I left the meeting room, my colleagues surrounded me. They were smiling and congratulating each other. I felt a sense of unity and purpose. We had stood up for what was right, and it was paying off. In the days that followed, the investigation began. I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I knew that the truth would come out, and I hoped it would lead to meaningful change. My allies and I remained vigilant, supporting each other through the process. We were fighting not just for ourselves but for the future of the company. I felt stronger with every passing day, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle was far from over, but I knew we were on the right path. Together, we would reclaim our family business and protect its legacy. The days turned into weeks as the investigation into Derek's actions continued. I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Each day brought new developments and I was eager to see how it would all unfold. I stayed in close contact with my allies, sharing updates and supporting each other through this challenging time. One afternoon, I received an email from the board of directors. They wanted to meet with me to discuss the findings of the investigation. My heart raced as I read the message. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I quickly gathered my colleagues to prepare for the meeting. When the day arrived, I felt nervous yet hopeful. I arrived at the headquarters early, wanting to gather my thoughts. My colleagues joined me and we reviewed the evidence one last time. I wanted to ensure we were all on the same page. As I walked into the boardroom, I felt the weight of the moment. The board members were already seated and Derek sat at the far end of the table looking tense. I took a deep breath and sat down. The chairperson of the board began to speak. Thank you for coming in today. We have conducted a thorough investigation based on the concerns you raised. We have found significant discrepancies in the financial records and we believe there is evidence of mismanagement. My heart raced as I listened. This was confirmation of everything we had suspected. The board continued detailing the findings and the impact of Derek's actions on the company. They stated that they could no longer support his leadership. Derek's face turned pale as he realized the gravity of the situation. He tried to defend himself, but the board was not swayed. I could see that they were taking this seriously. They had gathered enough evidence to hold him accountable. After their presentation, I felt a surge of confidence. It was my turn to speak. I appreciate the board's commitment to uncovering the truth. My father built this company with integrity and it is our responsibility to protect his legacy. I presented my perspective, emphasizing the importance of leadership that values the contributions of all employees. I spoke passionately about the need for collaboration and transparency moving forward. I wanted to ensure that the company could recover and thrive again. The board listened intently and I could see nods of agreement. They understood the importance of my words. I felt empowered knowing that I was advocating for what was right. After my speech, the chairperson turned to Derek. We will be terminating your position as CEO. We cannot allow this level of mismanagement to continue. Derek's face twisted with anger. You can't do this. I am the rightful owner of this company. The chairperson responded calmly. Ownership does not excuse unethical behavior. We are committed to restoring the company's values and ensuring that it operates with integrity. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was the moment I had fought for. Derek's reign was coming to an end and I could see a path forward for the company. As the meeting concluded, the board members discussed their plan for restructuring the leadership. They mentioned my name as a potential candidate for a leadership role. I was taken aback but also filled with hope. This was a chance to rebuild the company and implement the changes needed for its success. After the meeting, my colleagues and I celebrated. We had faced incredible challenges, but we had come out stronger together. I felt proud of what we had accomplished. We had not only fought for my place but for the future of the family business. In the following weeks, I worked closely with the board to help rebuild the company. We implemented new policies that focused on employee engagement and transparency. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as I collaborated with others to restore the company's reputation. As I settled into my new role, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I was finally in a position to influence the direction of the company. I was committed to honoring my father's legacy and ensuring that the business thrived. One evening, as I sat in my office, I reflected on the journey I had taken. I had fought hard to reclaim my place and now I was leading the company into a new era. I felt grateful for the support of my colleagues and the strength we had shared. As I looked out over the city from my office window, I felt a sense of closure. I had turned the tables on Derek and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. I had proven that I was not just my father's daughter. I was a capable leader in my own right. The challenges ahead were still there, but I felt ready. I was committed to ensuring that the company would never lose sight of its values again. I had learned that loyalty and integrity were vital in business, and I would carry those lessons with me. With determination in my heart, I knew I would lead Harper & Company into a future filled with promise and potential. I felt a sense of pride in what we had accomplished together, and I was excited about what lay ahead. The journey had been difficult, but it had shaped me into the leader I was meant to be.